Welcome everyone. Today we have our another new episode, and this episode is very important because already from the social media we know China government actually banned all of the cryptocurrencies, and I think the last week our honorable speakers and analysts they said that there are a lot of challenges and we need to overcome, and crypto is not ultimately the great part of blockchain. So we have our expert panelist Professor Rob. Already he is very famous in Asia Pacific. We have our another friend, Mr. Testa from Luxembourg, as well as he is a senator for World Business and Angel Business Forum. So beside that, we have our honorable fellow from World Talent Economy Forum, Mr. Adam. So I want to start from Professor Rob because last week you give some excellent analysis and example on blockchain technology.
Sure.
Social media actually, many people discussing about this crypto law rules and regulations. Please give some strategy and insight from the blockchain industry.
Sure. The blockchain market is actually pretty good sized. It's expected to be about $20 billion by 2024. Currently, it's running in the single-digit billions, so somewhere around $2.5 billion. So it's a decent market, and that's just talking about people that are putting in place blockchain technology. The 69% of banks are currently experimenting or using it. It's banking likes it a lot. It's very effective with regard to fraud. The banks have collectively reported that they're saving about $8 to $12 billion in fraud losses. It's kind of amazing how much fraud exists in banking still today, and blockchain is one of the most successful tools to mitigate that fraud. The average investment in blockchain, for another number, is about $1 million. So it's pulling money. It's one of the hot areas of technology right now to invest in and expand in. And blockchain, of course, exists outside of cryptocurrency, which kind of started it. I'm not convinced that we hadn't had cryptocurrency that we'd have blockchain. So it created it, but it is not instrumental to it. What blockchain is a distributed ledger that allows and with 100% transparency, so everybody can see every transaction. They just can't see who's doing the transaction or what the transaction is for. So everybody can see what's going on. The theory is that it's much harder for anybody to corrupt the chain. It is not crime-free. We've had exchanges that have been compromised. We've had wallets that have been compromised, and we've actually had a rather substantially large losses in cryptocurrency that have occurred because of theft. But it's much safer than the other alternatives. So, like any security-focused product, what you want is no security is 100%, but you want something that's more secure than whatever else it is you're doing, and blockchain is that. It doesn't fix the entire problem with people trying to do stuff illicitly. In fact, when used with cryptocurrency, a lot of times those activities are by nature illicit, which is why China has just this week banned cryptocurrency. But blockchain is still safe. So it's always good to separate the cryptocurrency activity from blockchain, because the blockchain isn't wedded to it. It's just that's what was used initially to make cryptocurrency transactions work. And final thing is with blockchain, people are using it have reported up to a 30% reduction in infrastructure costs using blockchain over whatever else they were using as a ledgering system. So it's economically very viable. The company that probably globally tries to lead in blockchain technology and sell it is IBM. They're the most visible, but there are other firms located in different geographies that certainly can handle and deal with the technology. It is relatively widespread. So it's fascinating technology. If I were looking at getting into it as a student, because it is a distributed ledger system, I'd be looking at dual majors in technology programming and in accounting. If you understand both, then you're probably going to be better able to help a bank or financial institution implement blockchain, because you'll understand the processes they're going to bring underneath the process and how they work, and be able to better implement this new technology without creating too much disruption for the financial institution. So it's an interesting area.
Thank you, Professor Rob. We have our famous speaker, world famous speaker. He is a senator for World BAF, WBF, and beside that, I think he has an excellent book on entrepreneurship and World Talent Economy Forum. We are also trying to developing this entrepreneurship ecosystem. Blockchain technology also, many startup from Singapore, from Malaysia, they are also developing startup on blockchain technology. So sir, how you want to analyze this blockchain technology? And uh, I know that you have an excellent book. If you want to share your thoughts and views about the book, you can share, because many entrepreneurs actually observing our show from Asia Pacific.
Yes, thanks a lot, Sharif, for inviting me to this interesting panel. Yes, so just to introduce quickly myself, yes, I'm Senator for Luxembourg for the World Business Angel Forum. I'm also an entrepreneur. I'm an angel investor. I'm a mentor. And I wrote a book, this book, Super Entrepreneurship Decoded, where, yes, I have tried to decode the secrets of super entrepreneurs across the world. So there are entrepreneurs active in space tech, in the transportation area, in food industry, in health tech, etc. And actually, what I'm describing in the book is that we are living, let's say, the age of exponential acceleration. So many technologies have increased exponentially. Blockchain is one of these technologies, for sure, like energy and the rise of renewable energies. And also what we see is a decrease also of the marginal cost. So this age of exponential acceleration is also an age of abundance. And if we see, for example, the cost of solar, the cost of wind power is decreasing over time. And now in many countries, it's even cheaper to produce than coal, for example. It's why, for example, if you look at Australia, they are replacing now all the coal plants with solar plants. And what we see also is, we came also in a kind of sharing economy. So the idea is that everyone can produce locally power. And in that sense, I think that blockchain is a very interesting technology. If you want to develop some cool platforms where everyone is able to produce energy and to sell this energy, for example, to some neighborhoods, you can imagine that, for example, it could be built on the blockchain technology. There has been also, some crazy ideas, and I love crazy ideas. And in my book, I mention several crazy ideas. For example, that some cars, there is a rise also of electric cars, and you could imagine that when we have autonomous cars that are electric cars too, they could just drive on the road, just pick someone, ride someone somewhere, and when the car is not used, if the batteries are, let's say, have a storage which is good enough, you could imagine that they can provide, let's say, also some recharge for some other cars, etc. And again, in that case, you need to give maybe an identity to the car. And again, the blockchain will be probably the good technology for that. So I think we are going to see, and we already see, that blockchain is going in many areas, particularly in the energy sector. So I think it's a very interesting area of development. Jeremy Rifkin, in his book The Green Deal, he also explained that if we want really to achieve the targets of the Paris Agreement related to climate change, etc., we need major changes. One of them is distributed energy and through some blockchain application. So I think that we need more entrepreneurs to go in that area, to try to have more renewable energy in our global mix. Today, wind and solar are still a minority of the global mix. So we need more and more in order to have decarbonization, to have less fossil fuels, and to see really to build a better future for the humanity.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir. Mr. Adam, uh, you are a transhumanist. Beside that, I know that you have different thoughts about this blockchain technology. So, what's going on? Even UK actually like banking hub, lot of banks and financial institution inside UK. So, how you want to share some of your experience in terms of UK banking policy and how they introducing blockchain technology?
Actually, for the oh, is my volume okay? By the way, okay.
Okay.
For the benefit of the discussion, and I just wanted to quickly read the simple definition of blockchain. So, what I found on Google. Blockchain is a system of recording information in a way that makes it difficult or impossible to change, hack, or cheat the system. Each block in the chain contains a number of transactions, and every time a new transaction occurs on the blockchain, a record of that transaction is added to every participant's ledger. It's not really a strong subject of mine, but going on simple definitions like that, I was thinking, well, that sounds quite secure to me. And I mean, of course, we need cybersecurity with enough strength and integrity to protect against cybercrime, hacking, cheating the system. But if we start to look at it through a more ethically nuanced lens, then hacking is kind of a dualistic issue, or neutral, or no, dualistic. Hence why we have names like white hats and black hats, and then those operating in the more grey areas and all different shades of grey. Because as we know, people in positions of authority and power tend to lose their moral compass a bit, and it was because of the bravery and courage of people in the underground or the fringe fighting for our freedoms and liberties who helped in the toppling of totalitarian regimes and mostly impenetrable ivory towers and panopticons. You could call that unlawful good if you like. So to me, it just seems like it's part of this massive multi-pronged operation to redistribute wealth, power, maybe. And Professor Rob mentioned the word transparency, and people in positions of power don't like their operations and movements to be transparent. And if they are maneuvering within more opaque parameters, then they can get away with just about everything. But of course, they want the movements of the masses to be as visible, measurable, and as quantifiable as possible. Hence the issue of redistribution, asymmetry, and the word panopticon, which I'm using to help illustrate my point here. And historically, the word panopticon has its origins in the work of 18th century utilitarian philosopher and reformer Jeremy Bentham. Obviously, he formulated it to try and give prison staff the advantage of watching all prisoners from all angles all the time. And utilitarianism and the good life aren't as easily calculable, in my opinion. And if society turned into something like the panopticon, I think our quality of life, our spiritual health, psychological health will be compromised greatly. And like you said, Sharif, I'm in Britain, and Britain is a very highly surveillanced place. There are CCTV cameras everywhere, and it's not unusual to read news articles and news stories about police arresting people for making a tweet that was maybe in bad taste or offensive even, but they got arrested and apprehended and charged for it. So I must admit I'm a little bit apprehensive about the next 5, 10, 15, 20 years. And yeah, there's a definite atmosphere of Big Brother is watching you in Britain, or the beginnings of such a situation. Thank you, Sharif.
Thank you. Professor Rob, there is one thing like you are expert from IBM and you work for IBM, and I think that IBM also producing blockchain technology. When we utilize as an user the blockchain technology, is there any specific features or guideline for user from your side, because you are technology analyst and you have different perceptions, how they can understand that this is the best technology for their organizational uh, purpose. Yeah.
Well, depending on the vertical, what you want to do to make that determination is take a look and see how widely spread it was in that vertical. Fabrice brought up energy. That was actually an area that I wasn't aware of was even working all that heavily in blockchain. There is an energy, something called an energy web chain that was created back in 2019, specifically for the energy market, and individuals can trade using something called an energy web token, so that they can participate in the expansion of energy projects like wind and solar. Kind of an interesting new way for people to get involved. This is a relatively transparent transaction methodology for folks that are using it. You do have to make sure that there's some base knowledge in the technology with regard to end users. It's the only end users that are really touching this stuff a lot are those that are playing in cryptocurrency, because you do need a base understanding if you're going to play in cryptocurrency. But you can work through an exchange, and a lot of the exchanges work kind of like ATMs and work within a banking-like structure. So it can be done, but you do have to build up some core skills. Some of the areas where blockchain is being used very successfully, of course, banking and finance, we mentioned that before, and cryptocurrency was what brought it to market, which is also interesting. But the areas that aren't quite as widely known are areas like healthcare. It's being used pretty heavily in healthcare to assure the veracity of the drugs and medical supplies being provided, because you use a third-party validator, and because in the medical industry, there's an awful lot of product that gets introduced that isn't valid. False vaccines, medical gear that is created by one company but branded against another. Here, for instance, during the pandemic, we had a whole bunch of ventilators show up that weren't ventilators at all. They were CPAP machines. And blockchain, if it's done properly with proper validation, can catch that stuff pretty quickly and validate the transaction. They're used for records of property. This is one of the interesting areas for me, because if you've ever gone through a sale, and I can't speak of property sales in other countries, but here in the United States, the entire process is incredibly time consuming and annoying. So what blockchain can do is validate the parties, validate ownership, and do so without the huge amount of paperwork and other work that typically goes into a property sale or even a property refinance, which is just kind of a nightmare. Smart contracts, creating a contract that can alter itself depending on the nature and the need, and where the transfers are ongoing and can cover broad areas. It's being used pretty widely. Supply chains you would expect, because it is a product that lends itself to any kind of transfer. So, for instance, right now we're having massive problems with regard to microprocessor shortages that are just screwing up supply chains all over the place. But it does allow for a much higher degree of monitoring. It allows you to better validate that the supplier you're contracting with actually has the supplies they're promising to sell you, which is often a problem in the technology sector, where a supplier will promise a supply they have to multiple people, and either not realize or not disclose they don't have the capacity to serving all those people, and so the end result is some or all of them don't get the contracted for materials at the time that they expected them, and it can shut down lines, as we're seeing all over the place. The final interesting area for blockchain is voting. Here in the United States, we've got a bit of a voting problem at the moment, but a lot of countries have voting problems. How do you validate the voter is who they say they are? How does the voter know that their votes were actually counted? Those are things that blockchain can address, and it does so without necessarily exposing the voter. The transaction is transparent, but only the voter themselves sees that the transaction was completed. And so you can have autonomous voting. Excuse me, not autonomous, but not thinking of the right word. Anyway, you can have voting where you don't know who the voter is, where the government doesn't know who the voter is, but the vote is tracked. It's the voter knows their vote has been counted and knows what it was counted for. something that at least a lot of countries don't provide right now. If you vote, you have an election and you don't know whether your vote was counted or whether it was counted for the right person that was running. Blockchain can fix that. It is highly transparent, so it's much harder to corrupt any kind of a transaction using it. It takes a lot of work to corrupt a blockchain. I mean, it's right now you'd have to be a pretty big organization to corrupt a blockchain. You can steal stuff that's being transpired by compromising an ID and password from the owner, but at least the transaction, the veracity of the transaction itself is very, very hard to compromise. You have to compromise 51% of the network, and the network is widespread and large. It's not impossible, but it's at a nation state level in terms of the amount of effort that it typically requires. So it for most things it wouldn't be worth the cost or effort to try to compromise the ledger. So it's arguably the most secure thing we have until we can get quantum working properly, and then quantum will probably overlay it. We'll just use quantum as the crypto part of the blockchain component, and now you'll have nearly unbreakable cryptography protecting the transaction, and so it'll actually get better with quantum and potentially better with quantum and not worse, which is kind of different than what happens with general security. When quantum is introduced, pretty much all existing security is going to be immediately obsolete, and it's going to be much harder to bring up the security market to quantum than something like blockchain, which would probably can just use it as almost a plug and play component. So it's an interesting area to study, and certainly a very lucrative area that I mentioned before. As I mentioned.
Thank you. Mr. Testa. So there are some interesting aspects actually Professor Rob shared with us. If you have some interesting insight, because you are also managing some world largest entrepreneurship ecosystem. So what you are observing, what is the future of this blockchain technology? Even when many of the company or startup, they are integrated their cryptocurrency and the blockchain together, and China government actually banned that all of the cryptocurrency is illegal. So do you think that still the businessman, like especially the small medium enterprise, they have keen interest about this blockchain technology, or by especially from Asia Pacific, or we will see some different strategy?
Well, cryptocurrencies, it's probably something else. And yes, there has been this announcement about China banning, let's say, cryptocurrencies, etc. But I think cryptocurrencies are there, and for me, they will stay probably. I'm pretty sure about this. Now, blockchain, I think it's something else. I think it's a real technology which is applicable in many sectors. So, number one is, of course, finance. And I'm from Luxembourg, and Luxembourg is the second place worldwide for funds. And we have a lot of players in Luxembourg using blockchain for different financial services. Also insurance, it's also a lot now adopting blockchain. I see a big future also in all traceability of supply chains. I was this morning mentoring a company, and they want to make an application for the traceability of chemicals across the world, because most of the time you don't know exactly what are the components of chemicals, etc. You don't know how to recycle, etc. So this could be put on the blockchain, and you could couple this with some encryption, so that because some companies, that maybe they don't want to disclose, some of their secrets which are inside the chemicals. But here, with the blockchain and with encryption, they could just disclose with the people that they trust. So this is interesting, and this is something we can do with the blockchain. Another area which has not been mentioned so far is investing. I see a couple of funds that use blockchain technology. This is particularly interesting. It's not the ICO, it's a real fund investing, for example, in startups. and you have shares, but you have also the ease of the tokens, so it's easily liquid. So you have directly a kind of second market where you can sell your shares into the companies that you buy. And I think this is very interesting for, let's say, non-institutional investors. So I think, yes, Rob mentioned different other applications today, but I think we see blockchain across many industries, from energy, from education, finance, health sector, finance, as I said, traceability, etc. So more the legal and the compliance aspect too. I think it's going just to increase, in my opinion. So yeah.
Thank you. Professor Kirpal, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you very
Yes.
well. Sorry for
Th-
joining you so late, but I'm here now.
No problem. No problem. I can understand. Thank you, Professor,
Thanks.
joining today. He's also another world famous speaker and very respectable professor, Professor Kirpal.
Thank you.
We are discussing on blockchain technology. So,
Yes.
Professor, you are from Singapore. So, what's your view regarding this blockchain enterprise? What's happening? The Singapore banking industry is.
I think blockchain is actually quite current. It has been current for the last almost decade, like last 10 years. And many of the industries and industry players are very used to blockchain. But I think the more important consideration that I wish to put forward for us to consider is that I think some people are thinking that blockchain is going to be outdated and outmoded very soon. And new technologies are coming into play, which are much more sophisticated and also at the same time allow much more flexibility in terms of usage. So I wonder whether our fellow panelists would agree with me on that. And if therefore blockchain is going to become outdated, then obviously we are looking at more exciting technologies that will come in. And I think this is where the whole idea of energy that is transferring itself would become more and more manifest and prevalent. Yeah.
Mhm. Thank you, Professor. Mr. Adam.
Thank you, Sharif. Excuse me. So, as we were discussing this, the issue of
I can't hear
consent.
you.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Okay.
Can you hear me okay now?
Yes.
Right.
Excellent.
Yes.
Sorry about that. I need a new microphone.
Thank you.
So, as we were discussing this, the issue of consent came into my mind. Of course, consent is a hot topic at the moment in light of current affairs and civil matters involving sexuality and gender and legislation and the ethics surrounding them. So, could we reframe the morality of consent or no consent for it to cover other aspects of our lives? What I mean is, we have voting systems, as we were talking about earlier. We elect our leaders using our voting privileges. Well, either we do that or we have the illusion that we do, and the two-party system is just a mirage or deception, depending on who you ask. But that's a topic for a whole other discussion. So that is another area of our lives that run on consent, at least partly. So should we move the goalposts to prevent unelected systems and ways of living that people feel uncomfortable with from being enforced on us, like crypto, blockchain, or whatever, enforced on the general population? Because a lot of the time, many people probably don't know what everyone is walking into, and thus taking more concerned people with them. And so, of course, that is when you get protests and riots and sit-ins on busy roads, because people feel they have to take drastic measures to be heard, like with China and its recent motion banning cryptocurrencies. Very interesting, but again, on the flip side, the population weren't asked. They didn't vote either way, whether the majority of people wanted it or not. Perhaps 70% of China's total population maybe would have voted to not ban it because they're doing business with it, or they are doing well in their business using cryptocurrencies. And then the government comes along and shuts it down without permission, and millions of hardworking people investing their life into their businesses for the last couple of years are facing ruin because they might be forced to stay there and not have the means or the permission to leave as soon as possible to another country where they are free to use crypto. especially with the social credit system. So, yeah, thank you, Sean.
Thank you. Professor Rob, there are three different countries, three different views, especially for the impact of blockchain technology. Beside that, you are discussing some point about politics. Even for developing nations, actually, actually, we need a better political systems, and I believe that if we can engage with this blockchain technology, maybe it will be helpful. Like, what do you think, what type of challenges we have to face to integrated this blockchain technology for our election systems and this kind of things? Is there any views or any different technologies or any specific outcome we can bring, or USA soon they will implement these things?
Well, so the difficulty in in applying a technology that eliminates fraud is for those people that are benefiting from that fraud, they're gonna object to that technology. If you have a political system where a minority party is controlling the government, then a lot of the reason they're able to control that government is likely keeping the opposing parties from voting, or at least from keeping those votes from being counted. And if that's ongoing at scale, then those people in power are not going to want to implement something like blockchain, because it corrects what to them is an asset and to what to everybody else is a problem. So if the people in control of the decision are benefiting from the fraud, and a lot of emerging economies have quite a bit of graft, fraud and illegal activity going on them, and not to mention emerged countries do as well. I think it's one of the reasons why we're probably not going to see blockchain here in voting for a while, because the minority power party has much higher power than they should have if we were doing things by a more democratic process. If you have enough people with decision-making authority that are benefiting from the problems, either because they've got some type of side hustle, or because they're invested in the companies that are chasing the fraud, then they're not going to approve this fix, because it's going to cost them financially or cost them politically. And so so you can pretty much look at voting as a bellwether of whether or not your government is really interested in being run democratically or not. If they're not interested in running democratically, then they're not going to like blockchain, because it forces a democratic process. If it's implemented properly with voting, everybody not only votes, but they get to know how their vote is counted. And that means if somebody's screwing around with the elections, the voters are going to know it, and those voters are citizens, and they're probably going to revolt. Even the suspicion of voter fraud has caused all kinds of problems here. So that's the issue. It's not that. I mean, right now there are a lot of companies that are expert at implementing blockchain. It's not really a lack of expertise or capability. It's a lack of will. And the reason why it's been so successful in the markets that I've spoken about is because the people in power want to eliminate the fraud. They're the decision makers. They're not making money from the fraud, so they want it gone, and so they've implemented the technology. But if you move to other areas that have fraud problems and they're not implementing blockchain, then you could certainly argue they probably have a substantial amount of graft and fraud going on. And some of the people that are benefiting from those activities are in the decision chain, and they're going to block blockchain. They're going to come up with all kinds of reasons. I was just reading through some of the arguments against blockchain, and really most of them had to do with cryptocurrency. They really didn't have much to do with blockchain at all. There isn't a lot of real negative with regard to blockchain except for speed. The one place where it clearly doesn't work well yet is in stock exchanges, and it's predominantly because it is in stock exchanges work on microseconds, and blockchain is in milliseconds. So it's fast enough for almost everything else we can do, but we do stock trades so fast that it is not fast enough. Now, I could certainly argue that maybe we shouldn't be doing stock trades as fast as we are, and we should probably be securing them more than we are, because we clearly have had huge problems in the past with the stock exchanges going south. But But at the end of the day, it's the limitations to implementing this technology or any highly secure technology is often the fact that either the decision makers don't understand it and they're being misled, or they are benefiting from the fact that the transactions are not secure. And certainly as an ex-internal auditor myself, if I was looking at an organization that was resisting blockchain, I'd be looking hard to see, how are the executives really making their money?
Thank you. Mr. Fabrics, so very interesting point actually, Professor Rob bring in the show. So what you want to add for this discussion, especially in politics, if we want to integrate this blockchain system, what will be impact?
There is a notion that has been popularized by the Singularity University and Peter Diamandis about the 6Ds of digital disruption. And when a new technology is coming, first it's digitalized, which is the case with the blockchain. And after that, it's a bit deceptive. So you don't see the real advantage of the blockchain. I think probably we pass this step because we see really what blockchain can bring, but maybe not enough. So today, blockchain, in my opinion, and maybe the other speakers have another, let's say, idea, but I don't think that we are still at the disruption phase, which is the third D. So probably we have not completely passed the step of the deception today. And I think maybe one reason for that is that, there has been all these ICOs based on the blockchain, etc., with a lot of scams. And so some people have been frustrated probably because of that. And we are still mixing, cryptocurrencies, blockchain, tokens, etc. So there is a bit of misunderstanding around these notions. So probably we have not passed the step of deception to have the real disruption. When we have the real disruption, then we have the demonetization of many services, and we will see the demonetization of many services through the blockchain technology and the dematerialization. So we will see many services that today are, let's say, done either physically or with, let's say, physical assets, etc., that will be dematerialized on the blockchain. And finally, when we pass this, is the democratization. So when we look at the voting system, etc., I think today we are even not at the digitalization. Yeah, we are at the digitalization because in some countries you vote digitally, but in some countries you still vote, manually by with some piece of paper, etc. And even after that, we will need to go to the deception phase, then the disruption, demonetization, dematerialization, until finally to have the democratization. And I think many people, are a bit afraid about new technologies. If we look at the vaccines for the COVID, many people are afraid about the vaccines. Oh, should I get vaccinated because the vaccine was built in 1 year? Then previously it was necessary maybe 10 years or even more. And they don't understand that we enter into the age of exponential acceleration that I talk in my book, Super Entrepreneurship Decoded. And today we are in the 21st century in an age where everything is going fast. And so it's why, thanks to the progress of computing, the progress of machine learning, artificial intelligence, it was possible to develop a vaccine in 1 year, why in the past it was necessary 10 years. And probably with the blockchain, some people, they don't see today, they are a bit afraid, oh yes, it's digital, so there is a possibility that they manipulate the votes, etc. So I think we need still some steps, in my opinion, before to get to this democratization. And the 6Ds framework, I think, is a nice framework to think about new technologies, and particularly for the blockchain.
Thank you, sir. Professor Kirpal, I know you are a philosopher and you have a lot of contributions in literature, but Singapore is a very good places where actually many new technology and innovations actually come. So what about this political like voting systems, is it possible that the Singapore government also apply this blockchain technology for their voting system?
If you ask me, I think yes, they can, and it's something they even might. But I think the entire political machinery and systems associated with that machinery are undergoing tremendous transformation, and the pressures are coming not just bigger countries, but the pressures are also coming from underneath, meaning that the little man in the street wants to have a greater role in participating in decision making of his life. And since everything political deals with everybody's lives, every person that's considered an adult above 18 feels that he or she must have the same. In fact, I was talking with my son who is 17, and he thinks that the children who are 17, 16 years old are very eager. And in England, I noticed there was a move in Parliament to reduce the voting age from 18 to 16 because young people are getting maturer, earlier, and therefore also much more exposed to political scenarios of all kinds, and they have a lot more knowledge of a lot of things that are happening now, like a old man like myself. And so I think we're going to witness quite a radical change, and with that change, maybe a major shift in terms of how we view decision making. So at the core of all political debate and discussion, I think, is the critical factor of who makes the decisions, and again how the decisions are made. These two, the who and the how, influence the what, the outcome of the decision making. So I think we are living in very exciting times. I would urge our colleagues on the panel to take another look at that famous book that came out in 1932 by Aldous Huxley called Brave New World, because I think we are now in the Brave New World and going beyond that. So, in different aspects of our lives, whether we consider sexuality, we consider reproduction, we consider behavior, we consider politics, we consider power, influence, big business, and all of that. So, it's interesting to know that today test tube babies are very easily available and doable. The only thing that keeps people from going all on this is the moral considerations. And so I think the intersection of morality and transactive energy, which is our topic, right? Transactive energy, that and the intersection of moral behavior, moral conduct, play a very big role. And whenever we talk about morality, religion comes in. And so I think we need to also prepare for a world in which the old confrontations between religion and science may start playing out again.
Mhm.
Thanks.
Thank you, Professor Kip. Thank you, Mr. Adam. So I know you are transhumanist, and transhumanist actually they have a strong views about these blockchain technologies integration. So, what do you think? It will solve many political problem, or how will it work? But one
Yeah.
thing, just like if we can more focus on present situation, present government systems, maybe it may be more helpful for our audience.
Yeah, I was just thinking about that actually. Sorry, I'll get a bit closer to my microphone. Yeah, firstly, I wanted to second what Mr. Fabrice Tester was saying about people being quite frightened by new technology. And certainly, exponential growth is speeding things up, and people will get more frightened until, in a panic, they will double down and triple down against it and resist it coming into their lives. So let's ask the question, just because the majority of the population, say 80%, have integrated a new technology into their lives, should it be mandatory, if that's not too strong a word, for the remaining 20% to then integrate it, lest they get left behind and compromise society, which would benefit from more than 80% of that population from adopting it, say technology. So there's the issue of consent again. I was reminded of a talking point from a few episodes back about when we were discussing smart cities, and a particular talking point was the ability to opting out, which ties into my earlier point about consent. And technology might be growing so exponentially fast that Luddism might pose a risk to a Luddite's own life, quality of life, health, and might significantly shorten their lifespan if they were a Luddite in a Kurzweilian technology explosion. Is that a world we want, or is it an inevitability? Have we passed the escape velocity? So, slightly more mundane example was, I had a smartphone a few years ago, and then I wanted to experiment using with a normal text and call cell phone to see if it could improve my mental health. And then eventually I started feeling like I was getting left behind. So then I switched back to using a smartphone again, and my life has improved drastically. All these new opportunities came, like this, for example. So that's a less dramatic version, but I think as technology becomes more ubiquitous, then it will be harder to live without it if someone's a bit of a technophobe and a Luddite. Thanks, Sharif.
Thank you. Thank you. This is an excellent discussion, and especially we get different views about the utilization of blockchain technologies. And I want to go for the concluding remarks for today. I want to start from Professor Rob.
Well, like any technology, particularly one focused on security, it's not whether the technology is absolutely secure. It's yeah, thank you. It's that that it's more secure than anything else, and than whatever it's replacing. And so right now, in terms of deployment, deployable technology, blockchain is the most secure ledger system that's currently available on a large scale. It is being used in voting. Surprisingly, Russia has been aggressive with regard to using blockchain for voting, which might imply a much more secure electoral process. But recognize with any ledger system, there are a lot of ways to compromise a secure ledger, and one of them is to have a second ledger. Just have whatever the voting system, whatever the voting count you have, and disclose via media. That's a completely different system than the blockchain system. And so the voters think they're voting, but what you're actually awarding the election, how you're actually awarding the election, is happening with a parallel process. The blockchain works when both sides of the transaction don't want to corrupt the process. The blockchain prevents one party from corrupting the process, but it doesn't necessarily prevent the organization, the banking organization, or the political organization, or whoever's hosting the process, from creating a second ledger and operating out of that. Now, it can be discovered. Anybody that wants to and can independently audit the process then can look at the blockchain results, look at the alternative ledger, and they're going to see immediately that they're different. And we'll know there's fraud. But in a government, often they control not only the process, but they control oversight. So you can, in a governmental situation, or even in a banking situation, if the bank are themselves corrupt, alter the results. The transaction may be valid, but the reporting of the transaction may not be. So where you might see corruption evolve is in the over-reporting of revenues, in the misreporting of the financial performance of the company. So that's where the transactions are working fine, but the investors are seeing a false result. So the idea is any system can be corrupted. Blockchain is better than any of the alternatives, but if somebody in power and control has a will, they'll figure out a way around it that can be caught with oversight. But in a lot of cases, the organization controls oversight as well, and that's when you have a corrupt system. In accounting, we call that separation of duties. And if you don't follow those basic accounting control principles, blockchain won't fix you. That's why it's important, as I said, if you're going to go into this area, to understand both the technology and the accounting structure that you're working within, So you don't think you created something that's secure only to find out you haven't, because you haven't implemented the other side of the secure process, which means adequate accounting controls also have to be in a place, because if they are not, blockchain does not fix that. It only secures the transaction. It does not secure the books. But you can secure the books. I mean, we've been securing financial reports and books for years. We know how to do it. It's just that when you have a high level of corruption, the oversight is either corrupted or controlled, and you have not fixed a problem. So just recognize it's better than what we've got, but it doesn't cover all security issues. It is good at what it does. It doesn't go beyond that. So recognize both the limitations and the potential of the technology. You do well. If you don't recognize the limitations of the technology, the implementation will probably fail.
Thank you. Mr. Fabrics.
Yes, as closing remarks, number one, if, let's say, there are some entrepreneurs or people that have some ideas among the audience, use, if you don't know blockchain, I think it's an interesting topic to explore for sure. What you have to understand also is that today, many really great solutions use a combination of technologies. So don't try just to use blockchain, but for example, blockchain can be really well combined with artificial intelligence, machine learning, supercomputing, quantum computing, etc., to really build some very, very nice solutions. And number three, I think we are living amazing times, and it's really amazing times to be an entrepreneur, to materialize some big ideas and try to solve some big problems. I think we touched to the surface of some big problems, but we see a lot of problems in energy, in food, in even in regulation of finance. I mentioned, the traceability of chemicals, etc. So I think there are a lot to do, and blockchain, I think, is an interesting technology. And if you want to have, let's say, also some more tips, read my book, Super Entrepreneurship Decoded. So thank you very much for the invitation. It was a pleasure, Sharif, and thanks to my dear panelists too. Thank you.
Thank you. Professor Kirpal, what's your concluding remarks today?
I think, as I said earlier, blockchain is, it's there and it's making its impact. I think we are going beyond blockchain. I think the new technology is going to be implant, and they already are moves to see how they can implant in our brains a direct kind of telepathic connection with other human beings. I think that is the scenario we really need to think very hard about and worry about, because in that way, even when we are asleep, people will be making all kinds of suggestions, and we know that hypnosis and suggestibility are very, very dangerous when used wrongly. So I think the discussion tonight, very good as it has been, needs to also take into consideration new technologies other than blockchain that are actually interfering with the way we communicate and the way we are going to communicate and we will communicate, because technology is becoming more and more a regular way of life, and therefore human communication is now taken over by machinery, and machines can sometimes, science fiction horror books are full of machines taking over, and the taking over is not rude and brutal the way some of these scaremongers frighten us, but it's supple, and by using a different word, a lot of things can happen. For example, if I say I loved what you said, but I'm sorry, I just have to disagree with you. That is quite different from saying I think you're an idiot. I think what you're saying is pathetic. So I think human communication now needs to be not only very sensitive, but also very cognitive of the fact that people are becoming more strong in holding their views. And when asked to share their views, we need to be very, very careful not to tread on a very sensitive toes. Yeah.
Thank you, Professor Kipal.
Thank you.
I know that you are one of the famous scholar from Singapore and the different Ivy League and the different university you are contributing. But definitely, we want to invite you more in World Talent Economy Forum. Mr. Adam, what's your concluding remarks?
Thank you, Sharif. Yeah, I didn't mean to sound like too much of a technophobe or Luddite myself. As you rightly said, Sharif, I am a futurist transhumanist, so by definition, I'm not a technophobe. But maybe as I've gotten older, I feel more and more protective of freedom and liberty, which is our birthright, of course. So, like Professor Kirpal Singh and Mr. Fabrice Tester both rightly said, we are already living in extremely interesting times, and it's a privilege to be witnessing all of this unfold in real time with our very own eyes and minds. But it's all just getting started, really. However, I don't think it would be too hyperbolic to predict that human society will become more divided, and whilst some distances shrink, other distances will grow, I think. And I think in particular, class divides and divides separating adopters of new tech and casual adopters all the way to full-on Luddism will continue to grow. And technology poses a kind of chicken and egg situation where I think we'll see more of this in the future, where grassroots technology for increasing an individual's privacy will jockey with surveillance technology used by large bodies and organizations. So I think we will witness increasing cybercrime incidents where the ethics of it all will get more nuanced and complicated, and it's unclear who the bad guys and the good guys are anymore. So, or just shades of grey where it's just simply business. So that's all I have to say. Thanks, Sharif.
Thank you. This is actually an excellent discussion, and we get a very good outcome from today's discussion. I'm sure our audience will enjoy today's session. We get views from Silicon Valley, from Luxembourg, from Singapore, and from UK. So that is the way actually World Talent Economy Forum growing. I just want to share some good news, because tomorrow we have our special episode with the Senator Anning from Australia, and he will join in World Talent Economy Forums, and he has some popular concept on economy, so he want to share his concept with World Talent Economy Forums. So I request all of our audience and speakers, maybe you can get some sort of interesting views from Senator Anning from Australia. So hopefully it will be one of the exclusive session for us. Beside that, in Malaysia, actually we are working with Malaysian climate change divisions. So we have another exclusive sessions, 25 Octobers, with this in this Dubai Expo, and we will discuss on public-private partnerships. Already, the minister from Malaysian Climate Change Division, they are really happy with our panelists, and they not only this open dialogue. We are actually developing a blueprint for Malaysia, for resilient Malaysia, and hopefully it will be another largest public-private partnership discussion in Dubai Expo, and it will be heavily promote 190 countries around the world. So World Talent Economy Forum more on national developments. So we have to work together. We have to work hard. And number three options. This is very important, because we also say that we want to engage with grassroots level. So from India, from Bardhaman, there are some professors, those who are actually nurturing sustainable ecosystem with 500,000 people. So they also like World Talent Economy Forum, and they are joining World Talent Economy Forum. So this way, like in not only in Malaysia, in Australia, in Singapore, in India, even some other countries, we are exploring, and we are trying to solving the local economical problem through open dialogue, and definitely through lot of initiative like startup village, startup ecosystem, like public-private partnerships, open dialogue with the governments. So I request all of our speakers, those who supporting a lot to World Talent Economy Forums, I request, it's a national contribution. The more you can contribute for World Talent Economy Forum, you can reach millions of people. So thank you everyone, especially Professor Rob, Mr. Fabrice, and Mr. Adam, I want to give special thanks for your continuous support, and bye bye and take care.
Bye, everyone.